What's the most unexplainable shoot you've ever witnessed? Story 1. I have a bit of a reverse one. Back in the 80s, emptying a waterbed by siphoning with a hose out the window of an apartment. Everything is going great, and once the thing has been totally emptied, look out the window to see no water on the ground outside. Look closer and notice the person in the apartment below left their window open. The hose had curled into someone else's apartment, and the contents of an entire waterbed flooded their place. So somewhere out there, there's a person who came home to an apartment that was completely flooded with water for no apparent reason. Answer: I need closure on this anecdote. Did you own up to it? Did you say nothing and wait patiently for a blood-curdling scream? Was this a breaking point for an otherwise mild-mannered neighbor that pushed him across the line into becoming hell-bent on creating a doomsday device and getting revenge against the world that was so unexplainably stacked against him? So many questions. Story 2. Broke up with my GF in 2003 and gave her our black lab because I would be traveling. Didn't see them again. 6 years later, I was in a hotel in Jacksonville and had a recurring dream for 4 nights in a row. In the dream, I would walk into a white room and across it to a hallway that was on the other side. I would kneel down and call my black lab, whose name was Dallas. Dallas would scamper out of the hallway and run right past me. I'd call her again, and she would turn around and come toward me and sit down in the unique manner in which she sat. Except Dallas was no longer black. She was white. Underneath the white fur were black roots, and her eyes were sewn shut. But she was the beautiful dog I loved, and I kissed her on the face. This dream repeated 4 nights in a row. On the 5th day, I decided to write my ex-GF an email and tell her the dream. She wrote me back and explained that Dallas had cancer and was euthanized 5 days ago. She said she thought Dallas always wondered what happened to me and wanted to visit me one last time. I bawled so hard, and I'm nearly bawling now at the thought. Answer: dude. Had a cat named Max. Got him from the Humane Society when I was 1. He eventually only comes to me. Loves me the most. Didn't care for anyone else in the family. I loved that cat like he was my kid. When I was around 22, he disappeared for 3 months. One night he comes back emaciated and all fudge up. I stay out of work and he sleeps in my room for 2 weeks. Being an outside cat, it was extremely unlike him, but he was all jacked up from fighting something. He is finally all better, and he is back on his usual routine. Couple years later, he disappears again, but this time I'm worried. After a week of calling for him, I give up. One night I'm almost asleep, or had just fallen asleep, but I felt my bed shake like it did when he jumped on it. I raised my hand up and he did the usual rubbing into it, so I rubbed his head and pet him without opening my eyes, and then he hops off my bed. I go back to sleep, and when I get up I ask my brother where Max. He says he doesn't know. I told him he must have let him in. He says he fell asleep at 8 last night, so he didn't. I firmly believe Max had wandered off to die and came back to say bye one last time. I cried and cried for days after that. I fudge loved that cat. Story 3. Was sleeping over at friend's small Appy. Mid-80s, on the floor in a sleeping bag, between his bed and his little sister's bed. Middle of the night I woke up suddenly, but not alarmed, just suddenly very clearly wide awake. A quiet man's voice in my head said, "You should get up and move." I don't remember even questioning it, or it seeming weird, so I got up over my bag to the foot of his bed and we'd back to sleep. Sometime later, early morning, there is this huge crash, and we all sit up, alarmed. His cat had jumped up and somehow taken down a shelf, holding this gigantic wooden 70s style stereo set, the kind with boxy wooden speakers, a turntable, cassette, and 8 tracks, etc. Probably 60-80 lbs of gear total. It fell maybe 4 feet and landed right where my head would have been. Mike yelled my name and rolled over, didn't see me down there, and looked around panicky-like, and of course I was down by his feet. We just stared for a second and soaked in the implications. Story 4. Many years ago, I was up in the attic of my parents' house. I slipped off of the boards and put my foot through the ceiling. When I looked through the hole that I had created, I saw the garage. That made no sense. I should have been looking at a carpeted hallway of the second floor since I was on the other side of the house. I sat there for several minutes, trying to wrap my head around what I was looking at. Eventually, I thought, I must somehow be confused about where I was in the attic. I climbed down, walked out of my room, and there was the hole in the ceiling, right where it should have been. Second floor, carpeted hallway. It's been nearly 20 years, and I still can't figure out what happened. Story 5. In high school, I went over to my girlfriend's house to hang out. We hadn't eaten dinner yet, and we were both getting pretty hungry, so we were unsuccessfully debating what we should eat. Suddenly, we hear a thump come from the kitchen, and since we were home alone, we went to investigate. One of the recipe books that her dad keeps on the refrigerator had fallen off, but it was like 7 feet away from the fridge and had opened to a certain page, chicken and mushrooms with rice. So I jokingly said, maybe we should make that. We checked the kitchen and she had all the necessary ingredients. After we collected them, we turned to the stove, and there was already a large, clean skillet sitting on it, ready to go. My girlfriend claimed she hadn't done it, as she had washed all the dishes earlier that afternoon and put them all away. I thought that maybe she was just messing with me, but she was convincingly serious. So basically, some friendly ghost helped settle a small argument by saying, "Look, you dumb shoot, cook this and shut the fudge up." It was delicious, by the way. Story 6. I was about 12 or 13. I lived on 5 acres of land that was literally wide open as far as the eye could see, even outside of the property. No trees, no buildings, nothing. It was summer and I was outside mowing grass, and my father was working in the garden when, out of nowhere, a passenger jet, I have no idea what kind, perhaps a 747, came over the property so low I could see the windows clearly and hear the immense roar of the engine. I could literally feel the pulsing of the engine. I stopped mowing and started running back to my house, and my father started running back to the house, and we just stopped and stared at it. Then I look at my father and ask what is happening, and he looks at me and shrugs and talks, well, screams actually, about how cool this is. Mid-scream sentence, the sound is gone, and he is clearly yelling over nothing. We look up and there is no plane. Nothing. We hop in his truck and drive all over the darn township, looking for this plane that was clearly low enough to be seen by people. We did have neighbors, just nothing big enough to block out any sections of the sky. No one saw or heard anything. They all looked at us like we were crazy. We just watched the news for the rest of the day, waiting for something to come up about a missing jet or an unexplained low-flying jet. Something. Nothing came about it. To this day, it still freaks me out. Answer. The military has planes that can look deceptively like passenger jets, low-flying and at high speed, They can also get out of sight in a short amount of time. I apparently live over a flight route from an AF base to a development facility. When they do modifications they don't want to be seen, they'll send the aircraft low and fast, sometimes with very bright lights shining down to obscure it. I've seen what looked like an orb of light screaming across the sky before, but the root and telltale noise of the twin rotors made it clear it was a Chinook zooming overhead. Story 7. Not me, but my father. When he was about 15, he was playing cards and listening to the radio in the living room of his mom's house. There's a knock on the door, and he opens it to see his grandfather stumbled over the porch railing, clearly tipsy. This is common. Grandpa would get tipsy and stumble over looking for something to eat. "Mom, your dad's here." He went back to playing cards. His mom finishes washing dishes and is wiping her hands on a towel as she looks both ways on her porch. "Who did you say was here?" "Your dad. There's no one outside." "Are you sure?" "Yes, he was there a minute." "Hey, go. He must have left." She shuts the door and goes back to the kitchen. About a minute later, she gets a call telling her phone number was found in the wallet of a man found dead near the train tracks in Kentucky. They describe the man and what he is carrying, and she gasps and asks again, "Who did you say was here?" "He was found dead a state over. Cause of passing was adult beverage poisoning and severe dehydration. My dad always says, I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in something." Answer: Grandpas can be like that. When I was 10, I remember waking up one night and seeing my grandpa sitting in my room just watching me. He didn't say anything. He was just sitting there. I sat up, asked, "Grandpa?" Even at a young age, I was a great conversationalist. He just smiled at me and waved. Then the phone rang, and I looked at the door. When I looked back at where my grandpa was sitting, he was gone. A few minutes later, my dad came into my room to say that was the hospital, and that my grandpa had just passed on. Heart attack. All I could think to say was, "I know. I don't believe in ghosts, so maybe that's just a dream that got incorporated into my memory of reality. But still." Story 8. In college, I did the graveyard shift for my job, so I would be up all night and sleep during the day. On one of my days off, my roommate woke up in cold sweats and came out to the living room where I was watching TV. It was 3:46 a.m. He told me he had a dream where his grandfather died. He went back to sleep and he got a phone call from his dad at about 7 a.m. His dad told him his grandfather died, and on the report it says his grandfather died at 3:46 a.m. I can't explain that, and that creeped me the fudge out. Story 9. My wife and I were looking for a house, and after a long search found one we absolutely loved. We made the guy an offer, and he, Joe, tells us that he got an offer an hour ago, and the house is sold. Heartbroken, we leave and go to my in-law's house. My father-in-law, who suffers from Alzheimer and wouldn't know any of his 6 kids or me for that matter. He asks me where we are coming from, which was unusual, as he was usually quiet. I tell him that we were looking for a house. He says in a heavy Irish brogue that, "Did you find one to buy?" I tell him we did, and it's already sold. He asks 2 questions. Where is the house and who is selling it? I tell him Joe from Mineola. He screams to my mother-in-law, "Nellie, get me the darn phone." I would like to add that this guy hasn't called anybody in 10 years. He picks up the phone and asks for the phone book. He then looks at the book and dials a number. He says, "Is this Joe from Mineola? This is Patrick Murphy. My daughter came to buy the house. Sell her the darn house." He hangs up the phone and Joe calls me, tells me that he played soccer with him 40 years ago, and the house was ours if we want. That one moment of clarity got us the house of our dreams and a great story. Story 10. We were sitting around a friend's house watching TV, not doing much at all. The discussion turns to, what would you do if you found a genie's lamp? Kind of stuff. What one wish would you make? I said flippantly, I'd wish for some strawberries because I'd love some strawberries right now. A few minutes later, there is a knock at the door. My buddies goes to answer it. A few minutes later, he dashes into the TV room and says, Hey GN Kim, you gotta come here, man. I follow him out and his mom is there with a basket of strawberries. He says, Say that again, Mom. She looks a little strange and says, I was just driving here and there was a guy on the side of the road selling strawberries, and I thought you and your friends might want some. We just look at each other and says, You blew it, man. You blew your wish on strawberries. Answer. Kinda reminds me of this time when my sister and I were kids, and we were laying on the floor, playing with a miniature foosball game. I was messing around and grabbed the game and shook it, yelling, Earthquake on the field. Not a beat later, an actual earthquake rolled through the house. California, so not that unusual. My sister, who has always been terrified of earthquakes, jumped up and bolted for the hallway, while I just lay there and laughed, too impressed with my own amazing mental powers to bother with safety measures. Story 11. This may sound crazy, but here goes. In college, my then boyfriend and I lived in an old house near campus. The house always kinda gave off a little bit of a creepy vibe, but nothing ominous. After living there about a year, I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Things I couldn't explain, but would convince myself weren't there. One day, I was walking through the living room and could have sworn I saw a youngish guy with long hair, wearing jeans and a bandana, sitting on my couch. When I looked again, he was gone. Shortly thereafter, the boyfriend's things started getting messed with. He'd left a stack of magazines on the bed while he went to shower. When he came back, they were spread out across the bed. Not like the stack had just fallen over, but arranged in a grid. Another time in the shower, the water turned suddenly cold. He reached down to turn the hot water up, only to find that the hot water was completely off. He started to feel creeped out, but I never got a bad feeling despite the things I'd seen. I joked that we had a ghost, the bandana hippie guy I saw on the couch, and he had a crush on me. One night, boyfriend and I were cooking dinner together. He came up behind me at the stove and started kissing my neck. I joked, Be careful, Jed. That's what we'd started referring to the ghost as. Isn't gonna like you doing that. He laughs and just says out loud, Sorry, Jed, you can't have her. She's mine. No sooner had the words gotten out of his mouth, there was a huge crash in the next room. We go into the living room to inspect and find that the glass door to our entertainment center is completely shattered. Pieces of glass were flung all over the room, like the glass had been hit with something hard. After that, no more weird things happened. No more creepy feelings. No more odd occurrences. Story 12. Excuse my bad English. I was working in a 7-Eleven graveyard shift. All unexplainable shoot happens at that time. But there's one that stands out. It was 2 a.m. and there was no customers. Playing PVC in my phone until this guy enters the store, looking like he was running from someone. He told me that no matter what, if someone asks for him, don't tell them that he's hiding there. I told him, okay. By this time, I was so confused because he's holding a cage with 2 rats. Then he proceeded to get 2 sachets of feet, a bag of Doritos, and toothpaste. He asked me if anybody's outside, and I told him no. So he gave me 1,000 pesos, around 25, told me to keep the change, then ran outside. I tried to give him his change still, but I tripped, so I decided just to keep it. Day after, a police came to the store asking if an old guy came here. I told him, yes. They asked me questions. What did he buy? What was with him when he went here, etc. All of which I answered honestly. When they were leaving, I asked, what did the old guy do? The policeman just smiled and then walked out the store. Until now, I don't know what he did and who he was running from. He did, apparently, since I was too busy perfecting my English in this story. I forgot the most important part. When I got a copy of our local newspaper, I saw that the old guy's dead. Answer: I used to work at 7-Eleven, graveyard shift as well. One night this ragged-looking dude came into the store and said, "Hey, call the cops." I was way confused, so I asked for clarification and he said, "Just call the cops and tell them I want to turn myself in." I thought he was joking, so I picked up the phone expecting him to say, "Nah, never mind," and walk away. But he just stood there watching me. I had to look up the non-emergency police line and called them and said that there was a dude here who wanted to turn himself in and wanted an officer down at the 7-Eleven. I asked him what he was turning himself in for, and he just said, "I'm tired of running, that's all." He went outside and put his hands behind his head and waited for the officer to show up. When the officer showed up, he said a few words. I couldn't hear to the officer, and the officer put him in handcuffs and took him away. I still have no idea WTF was up with that. Story 13. Taking an afternoon nap after a short morning shift at work. I hardly ever nap, but I had plans to go out for late dinner with my girlfriend, so I wanted to rest up. I laid down on the couch. It was absolutely silent in my apartment. My ears started ringing, louder and louder, nearly giving me a headache. It was keeping me from falling asleep, so I sat up and looked for the TV remote for some background noise. Got the remote, aimed it at the TV, and sitting on the floor in front of the TV, with his back to me, is my brother Lee. Startled, I jumped up and said, "Hey, when did you sneak in?" Doesn't move. I get a very strange feeling, goosebumps over my entire body, chills, feel like I'm going to throw up instantly. Without moving at all, I hear him say, "Everything is cool, man. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." I'm confused as hell right now, and for some reason I'm going to vomit my guts up. I run to the bathroom to puke, dry heave for about 30 seconds. Go back out and Lee is gone. I start yelling, "Hey, where'd you go?" No sign of him. I call him, no answer. Text him, waiting for response. I lay back down, but no way I'm sleeping. I feel a 100 better suddenly. I decide to go. Clean my car out so my girlfriend doesn't have to sit on McDonald's backs. Phone buzzes. It's my mom. Lee has been in a bad car accident a few hours ago. He's at the hospital now. He dies in the emergency room. Answer: I'm sorry for your loss. I can't imagine losing my brother. I had a similar experience to this, except I didn't see anything. One night I suddenly got extremely sick, feeling and lightheaded. I knew for a fact something bad happened, but I didn't know what. I went for a drive to ease my mind when my phone rang. It was a call informing me that my best friend died in a car accident. I'll never know why my body tells me when something bad happens. It's happened to me numerous times. Story 14. a barn full of mummified chickens, suspended from 20-foot rafters by their necks. Hundreds and hundreds of them, and all on individual ropes. 30 years ago, and I still think about it. Edit. Wow, this blew up. To answer some questions, I'm not sure they were there to be prepared for food, as it would be way too much work to hang them all individually, and with such long ropes. Plus, I can't imagine anyone wanting to eat a desiccated bird skeleton. The barn was abandoned and was knocked over for a new subdivision, maybe a year after we found it. Story 15. Me and my mom were outside a coffee shop, and I noticed a large white bird in the sky. It was too high up to see it in detail, but the way it was circling suggested it was a hawk or eagle. My mom noticed me looking up and commented how she'd never seen a white bird like that. We watched it for about 30 seconds, and all of a sudden it vanished into thin air. It creeped my mom out so much that she changes the subject whenever I mention it. Story 16. I once stayed in room 409 of the Queen Anne Hotel in San Francisco, woke up in the middle of the night needing to go to the bathroom, and saw what appeared like a decaying woman with withered flesh and a blue-white glow at the foot of the bed, seeming to stare at me, in spite of having eyes that were just black sunken holes. It was so terrifying I passed out, woke up in the morning and told my girlfriend at the time about it. When she came over, she laughed, and when I asked why, she said she booked that room because the hotel was supposed to be haunted. That room specifically, and she was using me as a blind test case to see if it was true. Ended up staying there another 3 nights without anything odd happening. Story 17. I might be too late, but this one was told to me by my mother. Her mother, my grandma, died in 1984, so I never got to meet her. She had an awesome life, began working as a model, then a flight attendant, then a news reporter, one of the first female journalists on air back in BR. Anyway, apparently the reason she quit flying was because in the 50s, when she had a layover in Buenos Aires, she and a co-worker of hers went to see a palm reader, or was it tarot? No idea. The woman refused to see them, but after much insistence, she said a few short sentences. "You'll both die in plane crashes. You," pointing at the co-worker, "will go soon. You," pointing at Grandma, "will take some time, but it will happen." They laughed and left. A few weeks later, the co-worker died in a crash. My grandmother, scared to passing, pun non-intended, quit her job. 30 years later, going offshore to write about a petroleum